about free will. And it's just an interesting question. It comes up a lot. People say or think, oh, I don't really have that much free will or any free will. And this is one of the many false notions on the spiritual path. Yogananda called them false notion. Sometimes I think it's also just from being weary of putting out effort or not seeing results, and just kind of, it's like a little child who you ask the child to do something and they say, oh, I don't want to do it, I don't want to, and they start crying and complaining. And yeah, sometimes we get that way, I don't want to do it, and so we sort of rationalize it and start getting philosophical because we're adults and we can kind of rationalize it more cleverly and intelligently. But also some of this comes from religion, which gives a false notion that it's only by grace that we're free, that we don't have any part in it, and we just sort of have to wait for it to happen, sort of passively. And so Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda ji, the saints, you watch them, and they have extraordinary willpower and energy and will. But the fact is, there are some limitations. And so we'll talk about that, about becoming free from our karma, about how much free will we have to change our destiny and to change things. I'm going to start by reading a quote from Paramhansa Yogananda. He says, "We may not realize it, but in effect, God parted with everything when He created human beings and endowed them with free will." That sentence is so amazing. We may not realize it, but in effect, God parted with everything when He created human beings and endowed them with free will. Then he goes on, having set in motion His self-perpetuating cosmic laws that maintain the universe for the benefit of His children, He became not the owner, but the observer of the drama. How human beings would use their freedom. This is pretty dramatic, isn't it? He became not the owner, but the observer of the drama. How human beings would use their freedom. I mean, this is like, when that got set in motion, boy, this whole thing got set in motion, and we have the free will to choose. And so then Master goes on, would they embrace or reject His omnipresence amongst them? Instantly, He could reclaim all manifestation except the love of His children, to whom He gave the freedom of will to cast Him aside or to accept Him. And so this is the one thing that God doesn't have, is our love, our attention, our affection, our complete willingness to merge back. And God's not going to take us back against our free will. We have to make that choice. And we have to do it not just with energy and yes, okay, I'm ready to have moksha. Lay it on me, Lord. We have to put out the willpower and the energy and the intensity of that. And this is willingness, willpower, free will. It's all tied together. And so we've been given the freedom to choose to love God, to turn towards the light, or to turn away from it. And everything we do takes some amount of free will. I think that even just to stay alive takes free will, because you'll see that as people approach leaving the body, sometimes it's just they've had enough of this life, they've done it all, and there's not the will to live anymore. Sometimes it's a more positive of just, having finished the sands of their karma for this life and having the intense will to go to their next lifetime and to move on and to go forward, rather than just to hold on to desperately to the remains, the dregs of this life, the last gasps of this life, just to hold on as long as they can. And as long as we're making spiritual progress, it's good to stay in the body and to keep going, or maybe we have to come back. And so we do have the free will to really choose to go towards God. Now, this also touches on karma, because people talk about destiny and, oh, it's my destiny to be poor, or it's my destiny to be this, it's my karma to be this, and I just can't break free from it. Swamiji talked a lot about this, and he talked about using willpower to overcome and hasten and really to sort of obliterate our karma. Because he said that in his life, he was talking once about his astrological chart that he was born with. And astrologers who looked at his chart would say, I don't know how you even are alive because of your chart. It just has so many challenges and difficulties, and it's so stuck in so many ways. How you even accomplish anything. And Swamiji said that when he faced obstacles of karma in his life with founding Ananda, and especially with all the steps of overcoming tests and trials with Ananda, he said he could accept that it was karma and he just had to deal with it. But he also saw that you can overcome your karma much, much more quickly by using and putting out a lot of willpower and a lot more energy. Because in fact, karma, it's action, it's reaction, it's a result of past actions. And just as the karma that we're facing right now, who created it? I mean, we can say, oh, it's destiny, it's karma, but we made it. So we do have the power to change our destiny, to change our karma, because we actually created the situation we're in right now. We may not accept that or believe it, but we're responsible for this. But right now, our actions are creating our future karma, our next karma, tomorrow, the next week. And this is something that Master said. I love this quote, and it's not just because I'm an American I love this quote, it's just more the attitude that it expresses. He says, and this is, Master was talking to Swamiji, knowing, I think, that Swamiji would come to India. Master says, in India there has been too much emphasis on karma. Karma, karma, they cry. It's my karma. I can do nothing about it. And Master says, absurd. Karma is simply action. Whatever has been done can just as certainly be undone. Americans have, to a much greater extent, the consciousness that everything is possible. If it can be done, I've heard many people say here, we will do it. And if it is impossible, we will do it anyway. It may just take us a little bit longer. Eventually, Americans say, eventually, why not now? That is the spirit that I like so much in this country. And partly that spirit comes from almost like from ignorance in a way, because as Americans, we don't know how hard it is, especially the spiritual path. When I came to Ananda Village, and I first started hearing about all these things, I thought, wow, I can become completely free and have samadhi bliss now in this life. And within a few years, I just have to go for it. And we did. We had that attitude of just going for it. That's a very American expression, go for it. Or as Nike would say, just do it. And it's just an attitude of just not accepting that it's hard or impossible. Now, maybe it is hard or almost impossible. It may be, I didn't get samadhi bliss and moksha in my first 3 years at Ananda Village. That didn't happen. But by having that attitude of, yes, I'm going to go for it in this lifetime. It's possible for anybody. And Master said this. He said, you can hope to become a Jivan Mukta in this lifetime through Kriya Yoga. And so having that attitude is really, really important on the spiritual path. And I share this a lot, but it's just funny because the goal of meditation is to merge back into God. And I guess you could say that every meditation that we don't merge back into God, you could say that we haven't succeeded or even failed. And after 10,000, 50,000 meditations in this life, here we are still putting out the energy and still trying. And yeah, sometimes you get discouraged. Sometimes you lose hope and think, oh gosh, this is so hard. My karma is difficult. I've been trying. That's natural. That does happen. But just try to have this attitude that, okay, whenever you slip and stumble and lose and get discouraged, find a way just to get back up. Grab a sadhana partner or buddy and call them, and just there are people I know who I listen to their voice and it's like, okay, I'm back on track, and I can do this. And so this is the power of satsang, because you can see people doing this and succeeding and making great progress. But it does take willpower, it takes willingness, it takes a desire for God. It takes, Swamiji talks about it as cooperating with grace, because this is the beauty of what Master gave us. It's an amazing combination of the techniques of Kriya Yoga and using our willpower and willingness and energy combined with divine grace. And it's the two of those together that's just, it's like a superpower combination. This combination of energy, technique, science, Kriya Yoga, and devotion and receptivity to divine grace. Because many teachings just teach one or the other, and will even say it's only through self-effort or it's only through grace. But Swamiji talks about it as cooperating with grace. He wrote a book that was titled Cooperating with Grace. It's going to be re-released by Crystal Clarity sometime in the next several months. And this really is what our path is about. It's about cooperating with grace. And Swamiji has said that all of yoga practices are effective to the extent and how they cooperate with divine grace. Sitting up straight, as we were taught in yoga and meditation, what does it do? It cooperates with grace. It cooperates with the flow of energy up the astral spine. And when we sit up straight and pay attention, we're cooperating with an energy that's already there. It's not something that we have to create. We just have to tune into it and work with it. And God wants to help us get out. And it's the one thing God wants, because it's the only thing that God doesn't have, is our freedom, which can only come from our giving ourselves completely back to God in love, in devotion, self-offering, in willingness. And so God wants to help us do this and wants to work with us and lift us up. And our part is just to keep turning back to God. And this is the biggest part of free will, is the ability and the free will and the free choice to turn to the light, to turn back to God every time we slip away from it. And in the end, give ourselves completely to God, because God is not going to take us against our will into moksha. It's, if we don't want divine freedom and we still want to kind of play around in this mud puddle of this world and our desires, and, as Master called it, stale cheese, which is just lower pleasures of happiness or the senses, God will say, okay, I'm going to wait until you want to do it, because I've given you the free will to give yourself to me or to withhold yourself from me. But once we start wanting to do it and start working with these techniques and practices, with devotion, with willpower, with willingness, then, as Swamiji said, when we lift one hand up to God, God lowers two hands down to lift us up and to free us and to take us home. And our part is, that's the only really important part of free will that we have in the end. And finally, I just want to read one more quote, which is, I've had this quote many years. It was on my refrigerator with a magnet when I lived in Ananda Village. You put on your refrigerator, you put a list, like a shopping list, that you don't want to forget this thing or that thing. So you put on your refrigerator the most important thing that you don't want to forget. And that's why I put this on my refrigerator, and it was on my laptop at times. And this is from Master, and it's really, really important, because, karma does seem challenging at times. And our tests seem challenging at times. It's the way it is. It's just, no one's free from that. We all have to deal with these things. But Master said, according to Swamiji, he wrote this, to a struggling disciple, he said this: your job for now is to get to God. Don't worry about all the karma you will still have to complete. Let God worry about that. First, destroy in yourself the source of karmic involvement. That source is your attachment to the ego. Once the ego is merged in him, then any actions you perform will no longer revert to yourself. Your actions will be like writing on water. They will leave no trace in the mind. In severing yourself from egoic involvement in any action that you perform, you will have cut the Gordian knot of delusion. This is the state of the Jivan Mukta, one who is free inside, even while living in this world. Being inwardly free, nothing he does can ever affect him again. So this action, this willingness to go back to God and to be free, which comes from giving ourselves to God and cooperating with grace. And again, lift one hand up and God is ready and eager and willing to lower two hands down to lift you up. This is a dumb joke, but I worship and love Divine Mother because she'll lower 8 arms and hands down to lift us up, which is a whole lot better than just 2 hands lifting us up. But this is our part, simply is to go back to God. And yeah, we'll still have karma to work out. But when that karma comes to us, it doesn't touch us because we're free inside. There's nothing there that affects us anymore because we're free in bliss. And this is the state of Jivan Mukta, is that we're free in God. And this is where Swamiji says that a Jivan Mukta, they can work out all their karma in a meditation if they want, or they can take on 2 bodies at the same time, incarnate and work out twice as much karma, or there's all different ways they can work it out. But our part is really not, it's not to work out all our karma. That's an endless job. Because, why? Well, if we work out this one karma and we're not free yet, there's still desire. There's still, oh, I wish this didn't happen. And karma comes to us and the thought comes, oh, I wish that wasn't happening to me. Doesn't that happen a lot to all of us? I mean, how often do we all face a karmic test and we think, oh, I wish this wasn't happening. I wish I didn't have this pain, or I wish that person didn't do that, or I wish I had my health, or I wish I had this or that. It literally is endless if we choose to stay on that wheel of karma. But if we just accept that, then we work it out. But if we have a desire for it to go away or for anything to be other than it is, that desire creates more karma. And the way to get beyond that endless repetition of desire and karma, is again to go back to God, to offer ourselves with willingness, with devotion, with devotional self-offering, back into God's grace, back into God's freedom. And then when the ego is dissolved, then we cannot be touched anymore by anything, no matter what happens to us, even the worst possible karma. Christ being nailed on the cross and a spear driven through his side, and people taunting him and being nailed up there in the hot sun, he wasn't touched by it. His only thought was for the people who were suffering by doing that to him. He saw the suffering that they were experiencing or were going to experience from the karma of it by killing him. And he just, with deep love and compassion and freedom, he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they are doing. And so he was able to see the children who were acting from desire, attachment, lack of freedom, and just causing themselves more pain, because we're the cause of our pain. We can blame God for creating us and tricking us and not giving us proper training and education and the tricks of this delusion and kind of fooling us and creating us. But we know now, our Guru has come to teach us these things, and we know how to get out. And our part is to put out the willpower, willingness, the self-offering, the devotion to get free. And we have the tools to do it, we have the grace to do it. This is a very unique incarnation for all of us here who are sitting here right now, because we know how to get out. And we have the Guru, the power of a Guru to help lift us out. And we have the tools to get out. And it's just up to us now to keep putting out that willingness, that desire, the free will to become free in this lifetime as quickly as we can. So that's the big picture. And Bara, Shamini, do you have anything you want me to add about this topic here? Which is such a good topic, because in some ways it's the essential topic.
Thank you very much, first of all, for all that you already said and clarified for many people. And there is many times, because we hear saints or Yogananda, that they only do the divine will. And then it comes this question of, oh, I wonder what's the divine will for me, or what does that even mean? And the question is more like, are we supposed to constantly be trying to figure out the divine will for me and the divine will for me, or how to tackle that particular thing?
Yeah, we do want to be, I don't know about constantly trying to figure it out, because it can get really kind of anxiety filled and self-involved to be constantly, okay, is it God's will for me to have the toast first or the orange juice first? I mean, people just get really caught up in this, and just it gets to be too much. And people, it is important, but even for our dharma in life and what to do, and people would ask Swamiji, what's my dharma? What's my dharma? And it's a good question to ask, but they were sort of, it's very often it was asked from the perspective of being stuck and frozen and not knowing what to do, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to act, or should I act, because I need to know what my dharma is. And Swamiji sort of tried to diffuse that by saying, your dharma right now is to take care of what's right in front of you to do. If the person right in front of you needs help, help them. If your health needs to be worked on and you need to change your diet or exercise, do that. And just do what is in front of you. And I've seen that when we try our best to do God's will in these things, that somehow our actions are guided. It's not that we have to be thinking every moment, okay, is it God's will for me, to go up the block and cross the street on that corner or the corner after that? And just, again, we start getting too caught up in our minds about it. But what happens is that if we're in the flow of grace and of cooperating with grace, then our actions tend more and more, our words tend more and more just to express divine qualities like kindness and grace and compassion and love, rather than always having to think about what I'm about to say. And sometimes, we do have to think, in a certain circumstances, should I say this, and tune into God's will. And it is important to tune into God's will, and again, to cooperate with it, because we also have to put out our own willpower. We can't just, Swamiji talks about giving a lecture one time, and, Master said to feel that God was flowing, speaking through you. And he said, okay, so if God is going to speak through me, then I don't have to do anything. And he was up on the lecture platform giving a satsang, and he said, okay, God, speak through me. And he just shut his mouth. And the way he put it, he said, I waited, and I waited, and waited, and waited, and said, God didn't say anything. And he said, he waited a long time, like minutes. And he said the people in the audience were starting to sweat because they were like worried that he'd totally frozen up. But he was just waiting for God to speak through him. And then he realized that, he had to actually use his own willpower, and he had to start speaking and try to engage and tune his will into it, along with God's will. So we do have to act. We can't just passively wait for God to act through us. And so we do have to put out energy, even when we don't know whether it's God's will. And I gave a satsang one time in America about this, and about how we do have to act even when we don't know. And the way Swamiji put it is that energy itself, if it's really consciously put out with the desire to act in accordance with God's will, that energy itself has an intelligence that guides our actions. And I expressed this in this woman, this very elderly woman afterwards, with a very thick sort of a country folk accent. Said, that's what my grandpappy always told me. He said, you can't steer a parked car. And that was such a good way of putting it. You can't steer a parked car. Because if you just sit there and wait, okay, what direction should I go? How should I go? Well, you have to just turn the key and start moving, and then you start steering it. And sometimes you have to take a right turn, sometimes a left, and it does change over time. But if you're in the flow of grace and the flow of wanting to serve God, to do God's will, then you do have to act. Guide thou my reason, will, and feeling in everything that I do, and in accordance with divine will. And so we do have to put out energy. And Swamiji was really keen on putting out a lot of willpower and a lot of energy. One time he asked me to do a particular task, and it was a challenging task, and I didn't know what to do or how to do it or how how I was going to accomplish it. And so, but it was important. And a couple of days later, he saw me. I was on his staff, and he asked me, "So, have you done it? What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well," I sort of hemmed and hawed because I hadn't figured it out yet. And he just said really strongly, he said, "Divine Mother's not going to do it for you." I mean, he saw that I needed to be kind of smashed a little bit with a strong message rather than just sort of a weak kind. Okay, Divine Mother is not going to do it. He was like, okay, get off your seat and start putting out energy and willpower. And I did have to start putting out the energy. And it was by putting out the energy and calling people and saying, I need your help or this or that. By putting out willpower and energy, it drew the divine grace and it drew the divine energy. And I was able to do it with Divine Mother. Divine Mother wasn't going to do it for me. I wasn't going to do it by myself, but by me putting out the greatest willpower that I could, but also with feeling I was doing it with Divine Mother, together with Divine Mother, in a sense we were able to do it. So this is the right application of tuning into God's will, listening for God's will, acting with our own willpower the best that we can. And there are times when I have no idea whether what I'm doing is right or not. And I have sometimes, seemingly big decisions. I mean, we give a lot of importance to our decisions in our life, but yeah, they're big decisions, and I don't know whether it's the right thing to do or not. And so in those cases, I'll pray to Divine Mother, if this isn't the right thing, please, because I'm having to go in a particular direction, and I don't know if this is the right direction, and I just say, Divine Mother, if this isn't the right direction, please slam the door shut right in my face. And if it is the right direction, please guide me and open the door so that I can see the door to go through and help me with that. And so it is just as we're acting, try to always see that it's doing it with God, with the Guru, trying our best to cooperate with them, putting out the best energy that we can do with a lot of willpower and overcoming our limitations, because sometimes they'll challenge us to put out more energy of our own willpower just to learn a particular lesson. Sometimes they'll challenge us to listen more and tune in more, and it's sort of a dance through life and just trying to find how to listen and how to act at the same time. And it's an interesting sort of a dance, is putting out energy and driving the car and paying attention and stepping on the gas, the willpower of the gas pedal, but also listening and tuning in at the same time. Is this the right direction? Is this the right way to do it? And this is the process of the spiritual path of cooperating with grace and cooperating with the divine will and using our own will. So.
Wonderful. I guess most of the time we want to have the GPS already active and telling us exactly where to go before putting the wheel. And I guess that's where I like what you said, that dance of listening and acting is very important. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned GPS, because now that we have GPS, it's like when the GPS is not working, it's like, we've taken the same road 50 times and we forget how to even do it because we're just watching the GPS rather than the road. And it's helpful sometimes to have the GPS broken, just so we have to learn how to pay more attention and tune in a different way. So yeah, God will sometimes seemingly turn off the light for a bit just to have us kind of learn a particular quality and awareness and put out more energy. So something else there, Shamani?
Oh, yeah, thank you. This is actually so helpful because Usually when we think of this topic, free will versus karma, it's always like so cosmic and so big. But it's like what you shared is kind of even with Master's quote, no, our job is to do whatever we can right now to move towards God. And even that, like you said, the simple thing, we can sit up straight in this moment. And that, I was just thinking, that's kind of free will in that moment as well, no? Like you show up for a meeting, you have the free will to move towards God or away from God, something like that.
Yeah, and it's like that with meditation and sadhana. A big part of our job is just to show up, every morning and just be there and sit in front of the altar. And yes, it's not always going to be a great meditation. Sometimes we do our best, and okay, maybe there's just some karma blocking us, but the only way through it is to keep showing up, keep doing it, putting out the energy. And I've seen, like, even with sadhana, with karmic hurdles with sadhana, that very often when I'm really struggling with meditation, with restlessness, with lack of devotion and these things, and with good meditations, effective meditation, that sometimes it just takes many months of putting out energy, and very often deeper experiences and deeper meditations come only after a period of just putting out energy, but also again listening and having the heart open and being receptive. And again, it's that combination. And at times we need to work more on one than the other, and we just have to be always working with both. So.
Mona, you have something?
Yeah, it was just a kind of follow up on what Devarshi ji was saying. Pranam Devarshi ji. Yeah, so like you're telling that, we pray to the divine and say, if it's your will, let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there are choices, and you take a choice. And after the choice is made, the decision is taken. Now, one starts seeing that maybe it was not a very practical decision after all. Like the other choice was more practical. But yes, we have prayed to God and, pray to God and said that if it is your will, then let it happen. But then the mind keeps telling, no, you did a wrong job. You should have been more practical. So, how to go about that?
We do make wrong choices and we do make mistakes. And yeah. And so I think it's just when we realize it, just try to get back on track with it and not blame ourselves, not blame God. Just say, okay, I just got off track a little bit. My divine GPS is now bringing me back on track, and let's try to stay on track, and also just try to see what we can learn from an experience like that. And just, okay, why did I go off track? And sometimes it's just past karma that, it's a karmic block that just almost unavoidable. And that's why I just find self-blame or guilt or, oh God, what did I do wrong? And start thinking in those terms. Just think, okay, I learned, now I'm back on track. Thank you, God. And let's just keep going, and please don't let me make these mistakes again. And yeah, we can also blame God for, steering us off course, even if it was our fault. I still think it's appropriate to blame God, to say, again, you created me and you created this delusion and you didn't train me very well and I messed up, and the root cause is because of what you did originally, so please help me get back on track again. And so just going through life, it is a process. It's driving this car through our whole life of trying to stay with God, trying to stay on track, and always going to the goal, and having God and Guru always in mind. I have made the pole star of my life, and if we just keep coming back to that pole star and keep going back in that direction, because the pole star it's the northern star that just people who are navigating and tracking by using the stars, that North Star is always a constant. It's always this very bright star that they can always rely on. If I just follow that, I'm going north, and I'm going in that particular direction. and just make God, make the Guru the pole star of our life, meaning always coming back to them. And yeah, we'll start to veer off track, but then if we, oh yeah, the pole star, let's come back to the pole star. That's what really gets us back on track.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it is said that just follow your heart. So, what is the difference between following your heart and following the will of God?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because yeah, I mean I've said that, follow your heart. I mean I've said that exact thing to some people. And what in the highest sense, what we're trying to say is follow the intuition and the inner guidance, not just following your emotions. But it means, see, sometimes people get too intellectual and just too rational. You know, Master said something once. He said that when you're trying to choose a career in a dharma and a direction in life, it's an interesting thing because children in high school are supposed to be choosing the direction of their life. What am I going to do with my life? Am I going to be a doctor or this or that? And you're very unformed and I mean, a teenager and pretty immature, and you're supposed to be choosing, you know, your career and your direction in life. And Master said one time, he said, the way to do that is to tune into what motivated you and what you were drawn to doing when you were younger, as a smaller child, before the intellect and before your family and friends started saying, no, you should be doing this. And he said that those initial inclinations, those are often more clearer samskars and impressions of what you should be doing. And in a way, that's following your heart rather than just the intellect and what your friends tell you you should be doing, what your parents want you to do. And so, in a way, that's following the heart, but in the calm heart. Again, not just the emotions, but tuning into the intuition of the heart, because that's where intuition is. It's in the heart. Intuition is calm feeling, awareness of the heart. It's where we perceive truth. So sometimes it's, for me, the higher way of tuning into that thought is just not to just follow. Yeah, we have to be practical too. And so, but not just to follow rational thinking. Because for myself, I mean, when I was in high school, I had a deep experience of God, and I made this strong volition that I'm going to spend my life as a yogi seeking God. Those were the exact words. I'm going to spend my life as a yogi seeking God. And it was like a solemn, not just a vow, but just a determination. And it wasn't very practical. At that point, I had never even actually met a yogi. I had just read books about yoga and saints, but I knew, I really, really knew. But if I went to my career guidance counselor in my high school and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow my heart and I'm going to become a yogi seeking God. And didn't even know what that meant, but I knew it. I just knew it in my heart. But that was not just an emotional thing. It was deeper than just emotion. So following the heart is not just following the whims and fancies and the emotions, but following intuition and calm, deep feeling of the heart to do what is right in your life. And sometimes that means going against common sense, like I did in my case, and going against what your parents or friends might advise you to do. So, but sometimes out of rebellion, we go against them and it's just ego. So it's just, you have to be sensitive and careful and aware that you're following the higher guidance of the will of God, really, in a sense. Okay.
Hi, Garima.
Hi, Namaste Devarshi ji.
Namaste.
A quick question on the same lines. So I was just reading the affirmation that we have for willpower. And in that it says, that I will use my will, but guide my will in everything I do, that it reflect thy will. Now, when I was thinking, and I was just thinking, sometimes what we do is we have a desire. And then we put our willpower, okay, we'll get it. We have this desire and we'll go towards it. And then we also say, okay, God, please, you guide me to get this desire fulfilled. So it is pretty much like, are you following God's will, or you are actually asking God to, fulfill your desire? And in this, I mean, what are your views, and what do you feel? How to get out of this kind of delusion of not running after the desire? I mean, and identifying it basically.
Sometimes desires are planted by God to push us in a certain direction. Sometimes they're just desires just to get us in trouble, basically. It's our ego. And so, I mean, just not try to work with redirecting towards God. And so if there is a desire, bring God into it, but not, please help me win the lottery. I just bought a lottery ticket. Please, God, use your will to give me the winning ticket and fulfill this desire. And it's an exaggerated way of expressing what you're saying. But sometimes there is a desire to, let's say, start a business or to do something that, fulfills something that's higher in us, to have, so a sense of certain amount of prosperity that we can help others, for example, and just. So it's always good just to pray and to ask, and that's why like I was saying, I just pray to Divine Mother. If this is the wrong step for me, then you stop it in its tracks and really stop it. Don't take my feelings into account and smack me down if you have to stop it. And if this is a higher thing to do, and if it's your will, then please help me in this. So yeah, in that sense, I do pray, please help in this and guide this, and open the doors so that something good may happen to serve your children, for example, with what we're doing with like the monastery. So it's subtle, it's not black and white. And yeah, I mean, I wish it was black and white and it was obvious, and then it would be a lot easier. But I think it's part of Divine Mother's way of helping us to develop a higher sensitivity of our own GPS, rather than spiritual GPS, rather than just depending on everyone else to tell us what to do, and which saps our will in the end. So we do have to learn how to put out energy and willpower and pray that it's the right thing. Even when we don't know, we still have to put out energy and willpower. And so just always bring God into it, and always be ready for a redirection or a readjustment, or or fulfilled either. Also, I mean, Divine Mother wants certain things to be fulfilled in our lives, and so this is something that we just also have to just, again, cooperate with grace as much as we can.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to ask if Saloni has a question, mainly because of her we are having this topic. So.
Guru Devarshi, that
Om
was
Guru.
so enlightening talk, and basically I had a big confusions related to divine will or the free will, we can say. Sometimes I wonder that God resides in every human being, and sometimes I used to wonder that whether there is a sort of free will or not. Now the things are pretty much clear that yes, the things what are happening are as per the God's will, and I think every bit moves here as per the divine will, and now I see that the things are flowing with the flow, and we cannot distinguish between the free will and the divine will, because everything is happening as per the divine will. The mayajal, the delusion, whatever comes to us, that is also uh, a way of Divine Mother to teach us some lessons through those situations we find in our life, and we learn and grow. So it is a way of God to teach us different scenarios, through the different scenarios, and we learn and grow. I feel so. So that was a very beautiful quote of Master, which you quoted just now. I just wanted you to share it in the group as well, so that we may learn and again, uh, uh, merge into it, be one with that God.
Okay, I'll share it with Bara and Shamini. I'll share all those quotes that I read just so they can share them all with you.
Please, please. We also want to put it on our refrigerator and
Yeah,
look at it.
because we forget so easily. Yep.
So, Devashiji, whether whatever I just shared it with you, so do you find it, am I getting it all right?
Yes, but I would only add the qualification that it doesn't mean that we should just accept everything as God's will or lila or play, and it's all it is all perfect in a way. But we are supposed to use great willpower. The energization exercises, they really are a technique for developing willpower and that type of attitude. And so at the same time that we have to accept that it's all from God, it all is God, it's all the way that it's supposed to be. At the same time, our cooperating with divine grace means putting out a lot of energy and putting out a lot of willpower. And, if we're going to, Haridas, I like the way Haridas Ji, an analogy he used, that if we're going to go with God and find freedom, he said it's like jumping onto a moving train. God's moving at a certain speed. But that if we just passively kind of jump on the train's going to smack us and just throw us off the side of the train. So we have to run alongside the train and build up some willpower, some strength, some energy, and then jump on the train. And yeah, it's going faster than we are. We don't have to run exactly as fast as the train, but we have to come somewhat close to that. And so use the willpower then, in that case, only to go towards God. If the world and everything that's happening around you, you feel that it's all part of the perfect plan of God, and then use your will to become free and to achieve moksha, basically, in this lifetime. I think sometimes, and Swamiji has made this clear, that we have a certain level of happiness and acceptance. And we think it's the highest because, everything seems fine and good. But we don't know what divine bliss is until we start having glimmers of it and a taste of it. And so people see others putting out a lot of energy with sadhana, with dedicating their lives to God, and they sometimes will say, it's just, you don't need to work so hard at it, it's all grace, it's all, divine lila and all divine play. But sometimes people are saying that from a perspective of, I'm happy in what I'm doing, I don't put out all this energy that you're putting out to find God, and I'm happy. And yeah, they may be, quote, happy, but they're not having just the divine ecstasy and divine samadhi bliss. And so this is, as yogis, we tend to sort of aim high for what we're trying to achieve in this life, which is moksha, samadhi bliss, not just some happiness and some contentment and acceptance with things as they are. So yeah, yogis can tend to be sometimes a little bit, I don't know if it's not unhappy is not the right word, but not satisfied with the status quo, with the way God has done things, because I know there's something a lot more that I can experience of grace and of divine bliss and of ecstasy, and in order to experience that, I have to get up to speed a little bit more and jump on that train and put out the willpower and energy. So it's a balance of acceptance. Kriya Master said, even-minded, cheerful. What comes of itself, let it come. But also putting out the energy. There was a talk recently I was hearing Swamiji, and it really surprised me. I didn't remember him saying this because it was a little bit, I don't know, some people could take it the wrong way. And the way he put it was, he said, yeah, it's good. Some people say, what Divine Mother gives, I take. And he said, that's a good thought. But he said, what Divine Mother doesn't give, take that also. And he was saying, put out the energy to try. It doesn't mean going against God's will, but it just means not being so passive. And I think for many yogis and devotees, there can be a tendency towards being too passive. So he wasn't saying going against the divine. That's why it was kind of jarring to hear him say that in a way. But I saw him do that in life. And again, if Divine Mother didn't really want him to do that, then she would let him know. But our part as children, the mother likes the child who puts out energy and is stubborn and maybe puts out so much energy that, they knock over the glass on the table and this kind of thing. The mother, I think, appreciates that kind of willpower, high energy child that maybe grabs and wants the highest of what's possible and puts out the energy like that. So it's all balance where we are, what we need, and just, but err on the side of willpower and energy rather than on the side of just acceptance. And when it starts veering towards passive acceptance, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So.
That is wonderful. Maybe Rupali, I think you had one final question, perhaps? If we have time for one more, perhaps.
Oh, you're muted. You're still muted.
Oh, well, see.
There we go.
No, I mean, of course, thank you so much and namaskar. I think the topic has really been very well explained, and I had my own, doubts that got clarified. So what I understood, and I've been hearing the word willpower. This has been coming to my mind. So power, we have the power to do a lot, but without will, it is of no use. That came to my mind, and I thought I will, And
Yep.
will, I understood from our discussion, it has many ingredients. You mentioned individual will, you mentioned divine will, you mentioned responsibility, taking responsibility, deep communication with self, trust in oneself. All of these to me are ingredients, essential ingredients of willpower per se. And to me, what also brought me to the practice is that whenever there is I engage with prayer. When I approach, I have a desire, like someone was saying, but I have a will and the power and everything else to do it. But when I add the divine essence to it, the resistance goes and things work out. So my measure of willpower comes from praying to God, and then that takes out all the resistance. So when we do meditation in the morning, I have felt that things are easing out. Even difficult times are feeling easy. And that is all that I wanted to,
Yeah. And that's the essence of it, is that when our willpower is tuning into God's willpower, then it becomes great divine power. That's what you saw with Swami Kriyananda ji. He had great personal willpower, but he also tuned it in with divine will. And that's when we can really change and grow, when we can really help others in great ways and just do great things in this life. And by great things, I don't mean egoic fulfillment and big things by worldly standards, but in divine ways, and with sadhana, with self-growth, with change. And again, it's cooperating with grace. This is what it boils down to, and it's a lot of ingredients. I like the way you say the ingredients, because for each person, they need more of this or more of that, and so there's not just one answer for everybody. It's just we all have to be really trying to tune in and see which ingredient in that moment we need more of. And again, that takes time, it takes practice, it takes prayer, it takes receptivity and tuning in, and it takes not just sitting in the parked car even when we don't know what we're doing. So.
Well, that was wonderful and enlightening, I think, for everyone. And we got.
May I ask one question, please?
Yeah.
All right.
So, Devarshiji, what is surrendering to God then?
It means surrendering our ego to God, which takes a lot of willpower, because it's not a passive thing. It takes Lord, I'm yours. I want to give myself to you completely and give myself. So surrender is just a dynamic, powerful thing. That's almost a topic all by itself. It's not just a passive thing. Okay, I give up. I surrender. I'm done. I'm out of here. That's the passive surrender. But the surrender of surrendering ourselves to God's is just really powerful and dynamic. And you can't surrender and give to God something you don't own. And to own yourself, in order to give it to God, you have to reclaim your lost kingdom of the little self. And it takes willpower and overcoming, and then owning yourself, that you can give yourself to God in complete devotional self-offering and surrender in a very dynamic way. Yeah.